From NBC News, Decision Night in America. Here's Lester Holt.
And here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Decision Night in America here at NBC's Democracy Plaza. It is 7 p.m. in the East. The polls have just closed in 6 states, and we have our first projections up in the iconic face of 30 Rockefeller Plaza. NBC News projects that Donald Trump will win the state of Indiana. When the votes are counted, we project that Donald Trump will win in Kentucky as well. Vermont goes to Hillary Clinton, the projected winner in Vermont. We're watching Virginia. The polls have closed there. Too early to call Clinton, however, leading in Virginia. Georgia, also too close to call. And South Carolina, too early to call. Trump leads in South Carolina. All night long, you'll be watching the race to 270 electoral votes. Here's how it stands based on those calls. Trump with 19, Clinton with 3. And we map it out on the ice for you on Democracy Plaza. That map will fill in with a lot of red and blue before this night is over. But again, 270 is the magic number that will elect our next president. Let's come on inside and we say a big good evening. I'm Lester Holt alongside our election night team, Savannah Guthrie, Chuck Todd, and Tom Brokaw. Savannah, whatever happens tonight, history is going to be made.
I was just thinking about it. We have an unconventional candidate against an unprecedented candidate, and this election has changed so much about our politics. It's upended every assumption you can make. It's redefined what it means to be a Republican or a Democrat in this country, and it will be very exciting to see who turns out tonight, who shows up to vote, what that coalition might look like for a Hillary Clinton or a Donald Trump. And I think we're in for a cliffhanger on the Senate side. Who's going to control the Senate by the end of the day?
Chuck set it up for us tonight.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to learn a lot early. I mean, look, we already are learning something right now. I think the quick Indiana call means that Republicans came home. You know, it was 3 weeks ago. Before Comey, Indiana was neck and neck. And the fact that we can call it poll closed, that is a sign Republicans came home. This is Mike Pence's home state. But look at Virginia and Georgia. And we may be talking about this story, the southeast corner of the United States. Over the last 12 years, we have seen this battleground map change. And now, welcome Georgia to that battleground, joining Florida, Virginia, North Carolina along that Atlantic seaboard. We're going to be spending a lot of time tonight. And how quickly those races get called will tell us how long this night's going to be on the presidential front.
And, Tom, a lot of big themes that will extend far beyond 2016 we'll be watching tonight.
Well, this country has been simmering for some time, and this election is not going to end all of that. The question is, does it boil over depending on who wins? And I think that's the real test for whoever wins this race. It's also the test for the country. They've got to figure out how they want to come together. You know, there's a lot of absence of confidence in the institutions of governance. 54% of the people said recently they would defeat every member of Congress, Republican or Democrat alike. So whoever wins tonight, going forward from here, is going to have to find a way to reach across the lines to the red state or blue states, because there are a lot of each, however you look at the map, and get them to work together toward a common goal. That's the big, big challenge, Lester.
All right. Hallie Jackson is in our newsroom here with a full team working on reporting the story of the night. Hey, Hallie.
Hi, Lester. We have our team of correspondents blanketing the country coast to coast, not just at polling places and election watch parties, but in all the key battleground states and, of course, at campaign headquarters. I'll be digging through exit polls here, and this is the engine room of our election center. We have our Vote Watch unit here, led by Cynthia McFadden, my colleague Pete Williams, checking for any voting irregularities, any legal implications or issues that might pop up. And this is our political unit with our pollsters diving into all the data. Consider this home base, where we'll be bringing you all of our coverage for the next 7 hours, maybe more. Lester.
Okay, Hallie, thanks very much. We're keeping a close eye on Clinton and Trump election headquarters. Manhattan's a pretty small town right there. They're all located just a short distance from each other and us here in Midtown. So let's check in with them now, starting with Andrea Mitchell at Clinton headquarters. Hello, Andrea.
Good evening, Lester. This is the night that Hillary Clinton has been waiting for. She is in a Midtown hotel with her husband, of course, former President Clinton, and other close friends and family. But they're hoping this will not be a nail-biter, but we've learned that they have written 2 speeches. They're hoping, of course, that it is a victory speech that she declares and that she is able to finally shatter that glass ceiling and the convention center here has a glass ceiling, so that is the symbolism of what they're trying to do and hope to accomplish tonight. The real issue is what happens in places like North Carolina. They see North Carolina as the tightest of the battleground states. They say that they're confident, but where they have gone in the last 24 hours tells the story. We were at 1 o'clock this morning at a rally in North Carolina, in Raleigh, North Carolina, and earlier in Pennsylvania. Former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell telling me that that is not a done deal. They can't take Pennsylvania even for granted. So therefore, that big extravaganza with both Obamas and Clintons in front of the Independence Hall in Philadelphia last night, and earlier in the day, she went to Pittsburgh. So that tells the story about just how nervous they are. They don't want to leave anything on the table, and they, again, are hoping that she can finally achieve the goal that she has sought so hard for 18 months and, in fact, for decades earlier.
Andrea Mitchell at the Clinton headquarters tonight in Manhattan. Katie Tur at the Trump headquarters also here in New York. Hello, Katie.
Hey there, Lester. Donald Trump is watching the returns come in at Trump Tower. He's surrounded by his family and his close aides. The campaign says that they are confident. They're already touting a record turnout from what they call white Republican counties in New Hampshire and in Michigan. But I spoke to a couple of New Hampshire sources who tell me they are not as confident as the Donald Trump campaign. They describe that state as tense, close, and sickening. I spoke to multiple sources today, both inside and outside the campaign, and absolutely everybody believes that this is going to be a tight race. They are focusing on 4 states, their core 4, as Kellyanne Conway puts it. That's Ohio, Florida, Iowa, and North Carolina. From there, they're going to look to Michigan, a blue state that they hope to turn red and get Donald Trump the presidency. But this is a campaign, Lester, that has conceded from the beginning that they are the underdogs. The infrastructure, the money, the electoral map was never in their favor.
Katie Tur tonight. Katie, thanks very much. Let's talk now about some of those results we ticked off at the top of the hour. I'm particularly interested in Georgia, Chuck. Too close to call. Georgia is considered a deep red state.
Well, it has been, and there was even the Clinton campaign talked about investing in it, and they said, well, you know what, we need to put more. Takes more time to make Georgia competitive. Barack Obama flirted with it both in 8 and 12. Now it looks like it's firmly in the battleground. I've talked to Republicans. They were surprised, and this last weekend, they were surprised the Clinton campaign didn't make more of a play for Georgia earlier, almost the same way the Democrats have talked about Michigan, like, oh, Trump finally discovered that Michigan is a problem for the Democratic side. But here's what I'm going to keep an eye on. It's outside of Atlanta, Cobb County. This is among the wealthier suburbs of Atlanta. Cobb is a county that Romney won by double digits. This college education split in this electorate. If she carries Georgia, we'll see the evidence in Cobb. She doesn't have to carry Cobb, but it has to become a swing county for her to win Georgia. We'll find out.
It's been fascinating watching over the last couple of days where these campaigns go, what they're worried about, or what the other side makes them think they should be worried about. I'm thinking of the to-do list that's got so many things left off of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're going to hear Chuck talk about these suburbs all night long, because that ultimately might be one of the stories that emerges here. Whether or not Hillary Clinton can pull more of those married white women that might have traditionally voted Republican into her corner, if she can, that's potentially a factor that could be decisive. And they've all kind of, once again, gone to the same battlegrounds, and yet we're starting to see the glimmers of new demographic battlegrounds, as I just mentioned, and also new geographic battlegrounds. Chuck talked about Georgia. Arizona got a late visit from Hillary Clinton. Arizona hasn't voted for a Democrat since 1996 when Bill Clinton ran for re-election. So I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of conventional thinking about politics and the map potentially upended tonight.
Tom?
Well, what you see tonight and what Chuck was just talking about is the transformation of the American political map. This country is changing at warp speed. Look at the Hispanic vote. It's an enormously important vote now. Republicans have rejected the Hispanics, going back to Pete Wilson when he was governor of California, ran hard against migrants in California. And a lot of Republicans said, we lost a constituency that belonged to us. These are family-oriented people. They're very faithful. They work hard. And we've given them to the Democrats by our attacks on them. Then you look at women now taking a more prominent place in politics, not just in the Congress of the United States. The number of governors around the country, the number of women who are the heads of major corporations, big bankers. More than half the law school classes now are filled with women. There's one of them. And doctors as well. So that is a changing map that is going on out there. And these two candidates have been running behind the curve, in my judgment, and not reaching out to figure out how they're going to get ahead of the constituency that is out there looking for somebody who can deliver to them the future that they know that they could have.
All right, Chuck, walk me through the states that really could determine this thing tonight.
Yeah, I think we know. We've talked about Florida, but I kind of want to build on this larger point here, because we know that I think, and just in this respect, if Clinton wins this election, she's going to win it because of this Southeast corridor. And if Donald Trump wins this election, it's going to be because he overperforms in the. I mean, that's what's going on here, is that we've seen the growth states, diverse states, these southeastern states are becoming more diverse. The difference in Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida and Virginia isn't going to be African-American vote. It's going to be Hispanic vote. And then up here, there isn't a lot of Hispanic vote in Michigan. There isn't a lot of Hispanic vote in Pennsylvania. That is what's given Trump real chances in both Michigan and Pennsylvania, Iowa, and Ohio. So we are seeing, and by the way, the map may look very similar to 2012 when it's all said and done, but I want to emphasize what Tom said. There's a lot going on underneath, and these state maps are going to look a lot different once we start seeing real numbers come in. For what it's worth, very little actual vote is in. I'm keeping a huge eye, for instance, on Florida, because we're actually seeing more vote come in right now in Florida than anywhere else. But again, 2% in. So, and as you can see, it's all coming from essentially one semi-rural county.
Yeah, and right now, a lot of what we're dealing with is anecdotal conversation about what's been happening in these states. Let's go to Kerry Sanders now as we begin to sweep around some of these battleground states. Kerry is in Florida. What are you seeing there?
Well, the polls closed at 7 o'clock where I am. Inside, there's about a half dozen voters still inside. About a minute before they closed the polls, they made an announcement. Two people literally sprinted inside. The reason they're still inside voting is, while it's the presidential election that everybody's watching, of course, the vote itself, the ballot is rather long, so it can take up to 20, 30 minutes for some people to actually vote here. Remember, Florida has 2 time zones. So while the polls have closed here, as you go out to the Panhandle, the polls are still open for, till 7 o'clock that time, and then people can continue to vote as long as they've been in line. It's likely that we're going to have a pretty long night here because of how close things are. I'm along the I-4 corridor, and while it's all indications are that the real determination of who's going to take the state will be along this corridor. And as you were just talking, the Hispanic vote may actually turn this state. And interestingly, it is those Puerto Ricans who have moved along the I-4 corridor that are really likely to perhaps determine who wins or loses here. Consider this fact. Since they've had their economic problems on the island there, about 7,000 Puerto Ricans a month have been leaving that island, and many of them coming here. In fact, with the current projections, we may wind up having the largest Puerto Rican diaspora here, not in New York, where they are still the largest group of Hispanics.
Tell me, how much have you seen of the ground game that we hear so much about, this getting out the vote effort?
Well, the ground game on the Democratic side has been much stronger than on the Republican side. Hillary Clinton's teams have actually gone door to door and had people in cars bringing voters out to the polls, where on the Republican side, it's been a little bit more of people being self-motivated to come out. And I think it'll be very interesting because Donald Trump made it very clear that he thought his supporters would just show up at the polls because he saw such huge crowds, and many of them, of course, showing up in this state. We'll see whether that translates into the votes that he thinks will result.
Kerry Sanders, thanks very much. Let's move on up to North Carolina, another part of the country that Chuck was circling for us a minute ago. Rahema Ellis is there. Rahema, tell us what you've seen there throughout the day.
Well, I can tell you the polls are still open here, and early this morning when polls did open, it was a long line of people here. Later on, not so much, but it was steady. And officials say it's been like that statewide. They say it's primarily because there's been a record all-time early voting here in this state with 17 voting days before today. It's added up to 45% of registered voters here in North Carolina who cast their votes before this day, making this a toss-up state for Clinton and for Trump. I can tell you what happened when I talked to some folks who came out of there who had voted, the Republican and Clinton voters alike. They said they were happy they had voted, but more than that, they're relieved this is over. Lester?
All right, Rahema Ellis for us. And the polls close in North Carolina at 7:30 Eastern, just about 15 minutes away, 15 electoral votes there. Tammy Leitner is at a polling place in Manchester, New Hampshire. We have seen a lot of movement, Tammy, there over the last week or so, and it's a notoriously hard place for pollsters to predict. What are you seeing?
You know, Lester, New Hampshire is still a wild card. We've been speaking with voters all afternoon, and I can tell you one thing. This state is divided. Now, keep in mind, this is where Trump got his start. This is where he won his first primary. Also something to keep in mind, 40% of the voters here are undeclared, which is why both candidates have been making such a push here. Trump has been here 9 times. President Obama was here yesterday campaigning for Clinton. And I can tell you that they are both making a run at this state. One other thing we want to mention, Lester, is the crucial Senate race. I can tell you that tonight, when these polls close, everybody is going to be looking at New Hampshire to see, 1, who's in the White House, and 2, who takes control of the Senate. Lester?
Leitner. Tammy, thanks very much. We are here at our NBC News Election Center, barely getting started. We're awaiting more poll closings. We're going to dig into the exit polling coming up, see what we can glean from that. We're learning some very interesting things about what voters are thinking. Stay with us as we cover the final hours of this historic battle for the White House between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. 2 parties, 2 candidates, and 1 prize. Decision Night in America continues right here on NBC. Democracy Plaza, welcome back now from our NBC News Election Center. Hallie Jackson is in the newsroom. She and her team have been digging into some of the exit polling we're getting. Hallie, what do you got?
Hey, Lester, we're looking at 3 big themes tonight, really. The first is going to be character for each of the candidates. Remember, this entire campaign, each candidate has tried to paint the other as basically unfit for the presidency. We'll take a look at these numbers of honest and trustworthy. You can see voters nationwide found 60% of them, found Hillary Clinton to be not honest or trustworthy. So that means 6 in 10 voters feel this way. Look at Donald Trump. His numbers are roughly the same, a little bit higher. This is still Clinton again, but for Donald Trump, it's 64% of people who feel that way. So what does this mean? It means that there is still a considerable character problem, no matter who ends up in the White House. We also want to talk, and you can see the Trump numbers here behind me. Another theme we're going to be hitting tonight are Hispanic voters. You heard Chuck talking about that earlier this hour, how key the Latino vote will be. Right now, we do see those Hispanic voters breaking for Hillary Clinton. Not so surprising. What we are watching is whether Trump underperforms Mitt Romney back in 2012. Right now, no indication that he is. But remember, it is still early in the evening. These are our early exits, which means we're still waiting on some of those West Coast figures to come in. The final point I want to make here, we are closely watching what happens with college-educated white women. This is kind of a swing group. They went for Barack Obama in 2008, Mitt Romney in 2012, and look where they are breaking right now. For Hillary Clinton, by 8 points. She has flipped that group from last cycle. But take a look at where Trump is doing better. It's with the non-college educated white women. He's up over Hillary Clinton by 24 points, according to our early exit polls. This is decisive for him. And it illustrates, guys, that this is not so much a gender gap that we'll be talking about tonight, but really more of an education gap when it comes to these white women voters.
Struck by those numbers about honesty, that Trump and Clinton basically were viewed the same by the voters, but she's the one that was seen to be labeled with the truth issue.
Well, by the way, Donald Trump has made a meal out of that. I mean, he has called her Crooked Hillary for the better part of the general election. But what's interesting is how remarkably stable these negative ratings are. They haven't gone too much higher or too much lower, but let's be clear, they are astronomically high for both of these candidates. They're the 2 most unpopular presidential candidates in history. They have very high negatives, but in a sense, they're kind of washing each other out since they both are viewed so unfavorably by so many voters. By the way, even some of their own supporters.
But that gap matters. The fact that she's less unpopular than him, our pollsters will say, you are right. But at this point, look at the difference of those negatives. That matters.
All right, stay with us. We're just getting started. We're minutes away from poll closings in North Carolina and Ohio. We'll characterize those races for you when those polls close. Decision Night in America continues right here on NBC. Welcome back. That clock is counting down 7 minutes, 13 seconds to the next set of poll closings, the 7:30 Eastern closings, North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. And I want to go quickly over to Chuck Todd right now. How late do you think North Carolina is going to keep us?
Yeah, I think, what are you doing Thursday, Lester?
No.
Like between the Senate race and the presidential, it could keep us up. I think North Carolina is that close. And it is a state with very few swing voters. It is basically evenly divided by its extremes. And that's what makes, it's like the country right now. It's going to make unifying very hard. It's why it is such a polarized state, too. And remember, let's not forget about North Carolina. HB 2, perhaps the last battle of America's culture wars, is taking place tonight in North Carolina.
Also, Ohio is going to close here, 6.5 minutes. Historic battleground state. How large does it loom right now?
Well, it is interesting here. Hillary Clinton can win the presidency without winning Ohio, and she would be the first Democrat to do it since John Kennedy. No Republican has gotten to the White House without Ohio. It is much more of an important path to 270 for Donald Trump than it is for Hillary Clinton.
And this is what we talk about, the idea that she came into this with multiple paths, or thinking she had multiple paths.
It does, and it all is because, what I keep telling you, the Atlantic Seaboard has allowed her to essentially lose Ohio, lose Iowa, and still have various paths to 270 because of what's going on in the Atlantic coast.
Okay, those polls close about 5.5 minutes. Stay with us. Polls are going to close in more states, including, as we said, North Carolina and Ohio. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC.
It's been a long day, but a great one, Chanel. Why? Because I'm in North Carolina, my home state. Welcome to Charlotte, and you are actually about to look at some of the last voters here in Charlotte. These people are casting their ballots just minutes before the polls actually close here. But just to kind of show you how things are working down here on the ground, people are coming through that door. They're getting one of these authorization to vote forms. They're getting their I voted sticker. They're coming to this booth. That's where they're signing up. And then they're going to these electronic ballot booths that you're looking at now. That's where they're actually casting their vote. Now, to give you a sense of things, we are in Mecklenburg County, which is the largest county in the entire state. And it's typically a blueberry and a vat of tomato sauce. It tends to lean Democratic. But what's interesting about this particular precinct is that it tends to mirror exactly what happens throughout the state. So, for example, in 2012, 48% of the people who walked in this station and cast their ballots, they voted for President Barack Obama, whereas 50% voted for Mitt Romney. And that's exactly what happened in the state when Mitt Romney won by less than a margin of 2%. So this time around, the voters are saying, we know that our vote counts. They said that I can't believe just how much attention North Carolina has gotten. But Chanel, something that's been interesting as I've been traveling back and forth talking to voters, and especially this weekend, is that those early voters, at first, they were kind of reticent to tell us about who they were voting for. But today, people were loud and they were proud. They said, I'm voting for Hillary Clinton or I'm voting for Donald Trump. But all of those people agreed that early voting was probably a good idea. It seems like they learned their lesson from 2012 when lines were outside the building up to 2 hours, and now there's not really much of a line, and we are just minutes before the polls close. Chanel.
Really quickly, Morgan, there's been so much attention paid to North Carolina. How would you describe the mood? So many people were afraid that there would be fear or anger. It doesn't seem like it's that way.
I have to be honest, there have been a couple of moments just kind of even watching today. There wasn't so much fear and anger initially. There were some people who were saying, look, there have been, challenges of election fraud and claims of voter intimidation. And they said they were worried about that earlier. But actually, things were pretty peaceful at the polls and even here at this polling station. But outside when we were waiting, we saw some of those voters who were actually waiting in line and they were kind of butting heads around things. So it's definitely a tense moment and people are excited to see who the winner's going to be.
All right, Morgan Radford there in North Carolina. We will certainly check in with you again before this night is over. Thank you, Morgan. Let's bring in Jennifer Lawless now. She is a professor at American University. Let's just dig right in. Your take with what Morgan is seeing there.
Well, this is a state that's going to tell us a lot. Once we know how North Carolina goes, we're going to know whether Donald Trump really has a path to 270. If Hillary Clinton wins North Carolina, it's likely going to be an earlier night than if Donald Trump does.
Let's talk for just a moment about the influence of especially race there. There in North Carolina, race and politics are both tough issues there.
They are, and in terms of African-American voters, Latino voters, and also female voters, this is where Hillary Clinton really needs to shore up quite a bit of support and ensure that she's getting high levels of turnout. There's not much of a question as to how women are going to vote, how African-Americans are going to vote, or how Latinos are going to vote. The question is in what numbers.
I was looking at some of the numbers here. In 2012, Obama lost, or Obama 48%. 2008, Obama 50%. What's the take here for, I guess, African-American turnout was key for Obama in 2008, and it's crucial really for Clinton as well.
It is crucial for her. So far, we seem to think that it's a little bit lower than it was in 2008. Latino turnout seems like it's a bit higher, and women's turnout is likely going to be a little bit higher as well.
And then earlier, just a moment ago, you heard me talking about the projections that we're getting. Any surprises? Here we have Indiana. Obviously, Donald Trump is the projected winner, picking up 11 electoral votes. Donald Trump has also picked up Kentucky for 8 electoral votes. So your impression so far?
So far, everything's exactly what we would have expected. If Donald Trump would have won Vermont, we would have a different kind of race in our hands.
All right, well, stick around, obviously, Jennifer. A long night ahead of us.
Yes.
All right, so coming up in the next half hour, the polls will close in several key battleground states, including North Carolina and Ohio, as well as West Virginia. Now back to Lester Holt and NBC News continuing coverage of Decision Night in America.
Welcome back from our election center. It is 7:30 p.m. in the East, and polls have just closed in 3 states, including 2 very important swing states. Let's take you through them right now. The state of Ohio, too close to call at this hour. North Carolina, too early to call. West Virginia, NBC News projects when the votes are counted, Donald Trump wins West Virginia. It's a state where his message played well. Its coal industry has taken a beating. Hillary Clinton made a misstep there when she talked about putting poll workers out of a job. Trump gets West Virginia. As we look at the race to 270 now, we move down to the ice there on Democracy Plaza. The map filling in. Clinton right now with 319 electoral votes to Trump at this early hour in this contest. I want to bring in Nicole Wallace now, who joins our panel right now. I want you all to react to some of the numbers we're seeing coming in from Florida right now, keeping in mind all the polls have not closed there, but we're getting some raw numbers. What are you seeing in these as we put them up here, Chuck?
I'm seeing that, look, it's 40% already of the vote in. It's all early vote here, but here's what's not in. We only have about 5 or 6. We have no precincts in Broward County at all, barely anything out of Miami. What you're seeing now as you're watching this map, we've got Clinton up a point. What that is that's where the vote is currently coming in. If you see any gray there, it means we have 0 vote in from there. All that is telling you is who's leading in that county. So as you see there, obviously it's the southeast corner that is about where all the population is, Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach. And as you see, no Broward. That's if she wins Florida, she's going to win it down in South Florida. The fact that she has a lead right now in the raw vote before we have anything out of Broward County, you're going to have a lot of nervous Trump people right now and a lot of very, very excited Clinton.
Nicole, let me ask you, there was even Trump himself had said Florida was must win. But then down the stretch here, we saw, let's go to Michigan, looking for other paths and suggesting they might have them. Do they exist, or was this a head fake we've seen?
Well, so even some of Trump's closest advisors by mid-afternoon today were starting to talk about what if. What if Donald Trump hadn't engaged in a month-long battle against the Khan family? What if Donald Trump hadn't taken so long and really never properly apologized for the Access Hollywood? And the answer to the what if is, what if he'd focused instead on a strategy that remade the map, where his economic message, where his direct line into people experiencing economic despair in that upper Midwest, what if they'd had a real campaign that could have targeted their voters and turned out their voters? Then it wouldn't be a lights-out moment for them if they come out short in Florida. You've called it the checkmate state, and I agree with that. But this story, if they come up short tonight, will be about a campaign that was not lost at the beginning. They had the potential to take his economic message, to take his outsider message, and to turn some states that really haven't been available to Republicans. They could have taken that message in a concerted manner with a real traditional, maybe boring in Trump's eyes, turnout operation. They could have done some of the boring things like stand strip. They could have done some of the non-sexy things like takeaway Twitter. And I think that what they will be talking about if they come up short is how they might have been able to remake the map so that states like Florida and North Carolina weren't do or die for them.
Did Donald Trump have his finger on the pulse, Tom, of what Americans cared about?
You know, any number of people. I mean, he ran a brilliant campaign from the ground up at the beginning, but he continued to run through the general election like it was still a primary. That the voter turnout was much different in the reality than what he was seeing in front of him. 60% of the people who voted for him today, according to the exit polls and the surveys that we did, thought he did not have the right temperament to be the president of the United States. These are people who voted for him. Any number of Republicans went to him and said, look, you've got to shift gears now. You've got to change. You've got to be different. He has a very strong ego. He knows how well he did giving them the Trump Act from state to state to state, but he didn't shift the gear in time for the general election, and he's paying a price for that in some of those states so far. Now, it's not over by any means, but they've got to scramble to win tonight.
But to your point, he was on to something, and in so many ways is remaking Republican orthodoxy. I mean, here's a guy who's saying he's against these free trade agreements, where free traders were that was an article of faith in the Republican Party. Some of the foreign policy of the traditional Republican Party he completely upends. And so because of some of those positions, he's opening up a path to Rust Belt states that had been going Democratic, and yet there's always the flip side of it. And what he did, to Nicole's point, it wasn't over before it started, because this is an eminently winnable race for a Republican Party in this year. Actually, history is on the side of Republicans. On the other hand, when he had his very first announcement speech disparaged Mexicans and kind of put those battle lines down, if we see in Florida that the Hispanic vote goes up and that ends up being decisive, a lot of people will look at it and say, boy, was that lost on the first day at the announcement speech.
It is going to be one of the early pieces of this drama. We're going to be watching what's happening in Florida. We want to get around to some of the battleground states now, where our correspondents are. In Ohio, which as we know, the polls closed here a short while ago, too close to call. We have got NBC's Chris Jansing, also Jacob Suberoff standing by in Pennsylvania. First to Ohio, and Chris providing the drama as it always does, Chris.
Boy, does it. And I can tell you both campaigns are holding their breath right now. Look, this is the heart of the Rust Belt. You were just talking about this. The union workers who have been really responsive to Donald Trump's message. On the other hand, I'm standing in Cleveland in Cuyahoga County. This is a place where Barack Obama won twice overwhelmingly, where the Clinton folks were down at the end of early voting. Now, they had hoped that there would be lines long enough to keep this place open after 7:30, but as you can see, the doors closed, no one is here. There is some nervousness on their side and a lot of confidence, more so than in other states that I'm hearing from the Trump campaign. Having said that, if they're able to pull it out, the Clinton campaign, it's going to be about the ground game. Today they did something really interesting, Lester. They took 400 paid staffers out of the offices, put volunteers in, and sent them out canvassing 4 different times. If they knocked on the door once and somebody wasn't home, they went back a second time. They believe that ground game can make up 1, 2, 3 points. That's what they're holding on to, thinking that there's a chance they could still pull out Ohio, Lester.
All right, Chris, thanks. Let's go to Jacob now in Pennsylvania. It's not a coincidence that the Clinton folks ended in Pennsylvania, and we know, as watching Florida, that it would be critical to a Donald Trump path. Describe what you've been seeing on the ground, Jacob.
There's no doubt about it. As to the reason that the president and the secretary were here in Philadelphia last night, there were 1,686 election divisions in the city of Philadelphia, Lester, and perhaps this is the one with the longest lines in the entire city right now. This is the main polling location for Temple University in North Philadelphia, and some of these young folks here have told me that they have been online for 3 to 4 hours. In fact, somebody just came by and dropped off some pizza for all these students. The line actually snakes around this way, all the way around through this area and down under the overpass down that way. I have to tell you, Lester, that this is central to President Obama and Secretary Clinton's strategy of winning this area with Philadelphia. If they can drive up the margins here, particularly amongst these young people that you're seeing right now that have been waiting on this line for hours and hours and hours, they could potentially close the margins that Donald Trump is running up in the center of this state, in the areas between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. We're going to be watching this all night long. Polls close in less than half half an hour here, Lester, but all of the people on this line, like I said, all the way down to that overpass, are more than likely, and in fact, are certainly going to be led into this polling place. Lester?
Well, they are well fed. That's good to see. All right, Jacob, thanks very much. Hallie Jackson's in the newsroom with another look at some of the exit polling. Hallie, these fascinating stuff coming out of these exit polls. What are you looking at right now?
I'm telling you, Lester, right now we're taking a look at how people feel about the federal government. Listen, people don't like the federal government, according to our early exit poll data. Look at this. 2/3 of folks are either dissatisfied or angry. But keep in mind, this does not mean we are a nation of angry people, because only 22% say they're actually mad at government. Let's dive into that slice of the pie, though, and you can see that of those folks who are angry with government, an overwhelming majority of them, 75%, broke for Donald Trump, according to this early data. Donald Trump has run a campaign trying to tap into that voter dissatisfaction, and you are seeing some of that reflected in these early numbers. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about a key swing state that Chuck brought up earlier in the night, North Carolina, and the gender gap, which is another theme we're following tonight. Take a look at this. You can see Hillary Clinton, essentially of men, most of them went for Donald Trump, according to some of these early exit polls. But it's basically the flip of it for Hillary Clinton. Most women went for her. We are seeing a double-digit gender gap in North Carolina. It's part of the reason why the state is so close, and it's potentially a reflection of what we've seen this entire campaign.
And I see, Nicole, you've been pouring through exit polling data on your own, going rogue here. What are you seeing in there?
Evan, so Savannah and Matt were kind enough to let me follow the mom vote this cycle. And a year ago, I sent a note saying, if you want to look at one group and determine whether a Republican can win back the White House, watch the mom vote. Because the last time it was done, it was George W. Bush, who in 2004 was able to tap into what we called the security moms. Some people call them the NASCAR moms. And it is impossible for a Republican to win the White House without narrowing the gender gap. And what I'm looking at so far, it does not look like Trump is on track to do that in enough swing states.
Look, I'm going to quickly go to the map here. I'm going to show one of these counties that have these moms in it. Right. It's in Virginia.
Well, moms are everywhere.
It is. They are everywhere. But I'm going to say the moms that I will argue matter the most. Let me show you quickly. Loudoun County. How Loudoun goes, so goes to Virginia. Okay, Obama won Virginia last time, won Loudoun about 7 points.
Yeah.
Look at right now. We got about a quarter of the vote in Loudoun. Loudoun is basically, college educated. It's a pretty high income county, sort of the next suburb out of Arlington and Fairfax in Northern Virginia. And she is up by 16 points, essentially doubling. Now you know why they were pulling out of Virginia.
Before we go to the break, show me where we stand in the entire state of Virginia. We had it just too early.
It has, and it's still too early. We have not a ton of vote in here. Let me, here we go, and let's show you here. Here it is. So far, most of the vote that's come in has come in from Republican areas. As you can see, Arlington, we have no vote in at all. Some parts of the Richmond area, no vote. Norfolk area, the strongest Democratic areas have not really come in yet. Only, like I said, I showed that Loudoun because you brought up, I was like stunned that already she has a double-digit lead out there. So we still got more vote to come in.
All right, we need to get to a break. We invite you to stay with us. More states, more calls, plus our panel and the man who helped orchestrate Bill Clinton's campaign to win the White House, James Carville, will join us. Decision Night in America continues right here on NBC. Welcome back. Democracy Plaza here on this election night, decision night in America. Just to keep in mind, we're about 15 minutes away from 8 o'clock Eastern, and we'll see a slew of poll closings, 16 states plus the District of Columbia. We're back now from our election center, and joining our panel is a guy who knows what it's like to help a Clinton win the White House, James Carville. Hey, James.
All right, yeah, we're a little nervous tonight, but feeling good.
Read into me. Where are the Clinton nerves right now? They're looking at the same data we're looking at.
I do know this, that the turnout in Broward, Fort Lauderdale, and Dade, Miami, city of Philadelphia are all eye-popping. Now, what I don't know is what the turnout is in Trump areas, but I do know the turnout in the Clinton areas. Johnson County, Iowa City is just like off the charts. Boulder, Colorado, the college town. I think the story at the end of this night, if I guess, is going to be the Clinton ground game. The logistical thing that they put together and the amount of money that they did, these numbers are beyond anything like I think Chuck or I, and none of us, Nicole,
is that an Obama gift
right now?
Yeah,
a lot of people. It was a Trump gift, too. He probably had something to do with it, too.
James, let me ask you this. It's funny you bring this up. So, yes, she's going to... but she ran against somebody who had no ground game,
Right.
who did
I understand.
nothing. So let me ask you, what would have happened if she had run against somebody with a ground game? Is this a very different, you see what I mean? Is this a very different election or not?
And, you know, when political scientists go study this, we'll be able to ascertain what a ground game means, because we're right, he had none.
Right.
I mean, they have, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. I think they said they had 3 million touches on Saturday alone. But, I mean, you know, and this is, at some extent, you got to say this is democracy at work. This is people out knocking on doors, people standing in line, people bringing pizzas. I mean, there's something kind of, at some level, something American about this.
James, if it works out the way that you hope that, that she gets the presidency, country is still badly fractured.
Absolutely.
But and she's known factor. Everybody knows about her. And on the other side, they don't like her very much. They're already talking about a target-rich opportunity in the Congress of the United States. So what does she do right away if she wins? We don't.
Well, the one thing is once she gets in office, she becomes much more popular. She's a much more popular office holder than she is candidate. I think that what she's got to do is acknowledge the fact that all of these Trump voters and people, they have something to say. They want to be heard. And I think she's got to, and I think a lot of Democrats say, you know, these people are really hurting. They're trying to say something. You know, she should reach out and say, you know, you were sending me a message, and I heard that message, and you came out. And when I say we're stronger together, I hope she says, when I say together, I mean everybody. I'm not, you know, I don't mean just the people that voted for me.
Should she go to some red states and listen?
I think so. I actually do. I think before she's inaugurated, I'd love to see her go to some parts that were heavily Trump areas and sit and talk to people.
Arkansas.
Yeah.
I actually mean it. So I think that's a good place to start.
Look, it's not a bad idea. And there are a lot of places that she can go, but I do think that there are a lot of Democrats that are like, these are our people. To a large extent, this is why a lot of us became Democrats.
Yeah.
And, you know, yes, we want to win the election, and we have a great coalition, but, you know, these people are, they're screaming that they want to be heard about something. And I think, you know, my guess is that she gets it. I really believe that.
What are your thoughts on the Comey factor? The polls didn't really detect anything, but when you get to this notion of Republicans coming home, we had a 10-day stretch there where all the bad news was pointed in her direction.
Right, it was, but I mean, politics for us has become so tribal that, you know, people have become so hardened by it. But I was very glad on Sunday when I was talking to somebody on the phone and said, "Oh my God, look what just happened." You know, it's one of these things that we're just going to have to ascertain later. It had Robbie Mook, her campaign manager, told me that it really helped fundraising a lot, and they had started to see some declines before that. You know, you don't know, but it might have motivated a lot of Democrats.
Can I say, you know what?
You just don't know that for sure.
I think you're right. I think we have to unpack this after the election. But what it did that is immeasurable is it changed Donald Trump. And you can't tabulate that effect.
He became focused.
It was described by sources close to him that it was like a thunderbolt, that it struck him for the first time in many weeks or several weeks that he could actually win this thing. So he gave up his Twitter. He read from a teleprompter. He did all that boring stuff that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. So you can never, I think the polls are hard to decipher because this was a time in elections when each party goes home to their tribes, as you said. But you can never measure what the effect is of Donald Trump being disciplined for 10 straight days.
Well, by the way, every time he was disciplined for 10 straight days, there was a coinciding rise in the polls.
Exactly.
Yeah, he can be disciplined for 10 days, but the stuff he did on his announcement day, the stuff that he did in the campaign, that gets baked in the cake, and that makes impressions that last on people. 10 days of discipline, going to help some. But
James, I'm curious, what does Bill Clinton think of losing the Bubba vote? I say this because
you know what?
Bill Clinton's map in 1992, these were his people.
I am very reluctant to talk about conversations I had with President Clinton, but he is not happy about it at all. I can assure you that it is a topic that gnaws on him. And
his people in Arkansas,
right,
he grew up with.
Right. And some Democrats say that, look, our coalition is growing. That coalition is shrinking, which is demonstrably true. But there are a lot of people in the Democratic coalition that say, these were.
I'm going to interrupt you because we've got a call here in South Carolina. NBC News projects when the votes are in, Donald Trump wins South Carolina. Chuck?
Not a huge surprise. It is the one state, though, in the southeast corner down there that hasn't moved into battleground territory, but I can tell you there are a bunch of Democrats there that think with time it could.
Let's look at we can go down to the map there and look at where things stand now in the electoral count. There it is, the race to 270. 33 for Trump, 3 for Clinton. The night is still early. The map barely filled in. But there you have it right now.
Play the threes right now in the on your lotto numbers right now and see if it hits before 8.
We're not encouraging that behavior. We want to point that out. All right, stay with us. We're just minutes away from those 8 p.m. poll closings. A big moment rapidly approaching. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues right here on NBC. The plot is about to thicken. 7.5 minutes until polls close in 16 states plus the District of Columbia. We've got some big ones here. Florida, Pennsylvania on there. This is where my friend Chuck Todd begins to salivate now as he looks at his map. Tell me about what you're going to focus on.
Let me tell you this. It is Florida, Florida, Florida. Okay, the part that the polls are closing in, of course, is the central time zone area there. But I'll tell you this. Look, we have 71% in. Clinton's pulled a lead in statewide. Here is your swing county of Florida. As Hillsborough goes, this is in Tampa. As Hillsborough goes, so goes the state of Florida. She's got a 10-point lead here, as you can see. Still a lot of vote to come in Hillsborough, but this is a good sign for her. Let me just quickly show you the spread in Miami-Dade. 30-point spread. This is where we were watching to see if there's an Hispanic surge for her. It certainly looks like it so far, but this is just early vote. We don't know what Election Day voting is going.
If this goes to Clinton, then a lot of eyes are going to lock on Pennsylvania.
It becomes he's got to win Pennsylvania
and that's in the next half hour too.
Michigan. If he loses Florida, he needs Pennsylvania and Michigan. He can't just get away with winning one of them.
This all comes back now to that same area of the country you're talking about as we move up from Florida.
This has become her power center. It really, it could be interesting, but it absolutely could. The fact that Virginia, Florida, and you heard it. I was talking to Robbie Mook earlier today, and he brought up Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania. He said that's their backbone to 270, and they think they're going to win all three, and they think once they do, it's checkmate for Donald Trump.
All right, we've got some big ones again coming up. 16 states, District of Columbia. Grab a drink, grab a snack, hurry back to the TV. Those 8 p.m. poll closings moments away. A lot of important states. Florida, 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 as Chuck said. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC.
Kind of tuning in, getting home from work. How would you describe what's going on there behind you? We see lots of people there. Any word on what the candidate is doing at this point? Obviously, the interviews are probably done. I guess the work is done. At this point, it's really a waiting game.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And Donald Trump is waiting at his home in Trump Tower alongside his family and some close aides. We're told that he's sipping Diet Coke as he watches the results come in right now. He and Mike Pence will make their way over just a matter of blocks away from Trump Tower to where we are a little bit later in the evening as they see the results come in. What's always entertaining about this is that it looks big on TV and it's a pretty big room, but it's half filled with media and a podium that's set up to make Donald Trump look presidential.
All right, Peter Alexander, now I have this vision of him sipping Coke somewhere. All right, thank you, Peter. All right, well, joining us really quickly from Jennifer Lawless from American University. Let's dig in really quickly. I find this fascinating that, you know what, I shouldn't say it's fascinating, but the Trump camp, they're optimistic.
They have to be optimistic. The Clinton campaign has to be optimistic, too. The reality is people are still out there voting and people are watching the news. And nobody wants a foregone conclusion and nobody wants to support a presumptive loser.
What's your take on what Peter was talking about as far as voter turnout? Obviously, there are certain votes that are key for him. And then they're saying at this point that they're not seeing as many as the African-American turnout in some places, which is also key.
Right. Low African-American turnout is a problem for Hillary Clinton. Elevated levels of turnout among white working class men in particular certainly helps Donald Trump. So those will be the key demographics that we watch throughout the night.
I thought it was interesting. We've been talking about the fact that it seems as if the Republicans are coming home, if you will. Hillary Clinton's Democratic base, they're coming home. But what about all of these people in the middle? We keep hearing that they don't know what they're going to do or it's going to be a last-second decision, but their visions for the country are just so different.
They are, and there aren't that many of those people left. There aren't that many people going to cast a vote today who were truly undecided until they walked into the polling place. Most people, even who don't identify as Democrats or Republicans but lean one way, consistently vote that way.
All right, thank you. Jennifer Lawless, stick around. A long night ahead of us, as we keep saying. All right, and coming up in the next half hour, we will have poll closings in 16 more states and the District of Columbia. That includes key battleground states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. We're now going to throw it back to Lester Holt and NBC News continuing coverage of Decision Night in America.
We are back on this Decision Night in America. It is 8 o'clock in the East, one of the biggest moments of the night, as polls have just closed in a slew of states, 16 in all, plus the District of Columbia. Let's take you through where things stand right now. Florida, we've been watching that raw vote come in. Right now, that is too close to call in Florida. Pennsylvania, another big one, battleground state, too early to call. Pennsylvania, too early to call. New Hampshire, too early to call. Now we've got a bunch of states here in which there are projected winners, starting with Alabama. We project that Donald Trump wins Alabama. In Connecticut, Hillary Clinton, the projected winner. Delaware will also go to Hillary Clinton. The District of Columbia to Hillary Clinton. Illinois, her home state, goes to Hillary Clinton, as well as the state of Maryland. And Massachusetts, also in the Clinton column. Mississippi, we project that Donald Trump wins in Mississippi. New Jersey to Clinton. Oklahoma, the projected winner, Donald Trump. Rhode Island, Hillary Clinton. And Tennessee, Donald Trump. Let's look at the count right now, the race to 270. At this hour, based on those projections, Clinton stands with 75, Trump with 66 in the race to 270. Now, a couple others we want to mention right now. We're watching Maine. It is too early. Actually, we're looking at Missouri up there, but too early. Maine is too early, but Clinton is leading there in Mississippi. No, I'm sorry. No, that was Missouri. I'm sorry. My bad there. Missouri was too early. We got that straight, and Trump is leading there. And there is the map now as the colors begin to fill in and on the race to 270. Savannah Guthrie is here right now. Savannah, we're also watching some big Senate races.
Yeah, I promised you it was going to be a cliffhanger. Now, the Democrats are trying to wrest control of the Senate, and they've got a pickup, meaning they've got one seat now into their corner that they need. They need 4 if Hillary Clinton wins. It's Tammy Duckworth, the congresswoman who is going to be the senator from Illinois. She displaces the incumbent, Mark Kirk, widely believed to be probably the most vulnerable incumbent in the Senate. Tammy Duckworth, of course, an Iraq War veteran, a wounded warrior. And Mark Kirk was one of the first Republicans to really distance himself from Trump. He did so after Trump questioned the impartiality of an American judge who had Mexican heritage. He was one of the first. And yet, as we've seen in so many of these Senate races, Tammy Duckworth, the Democrat in that race, really tried to tie Kirk to Trump as much as possible. It's a deep blue state. It's the president's home state, so it's not a big shocker. But if you're keeping score at home, and we hope you are, the Democrats have netted 1.
All right, let's bring in now our panel. James Carville remains here with us, and we welcome in our friend Hugh Hewitt, NBC News political analyst and host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on Salem Radio Network. You just heard all those calls. Where's your head at right now, Hugh?
I'm very happy that Senator Rob Portman has been reelected. He ran a model campaign, a responsible campaign built on civility, but also hard-nosed politics of the sort that James did when he first won a state race in Pennsylvania. He also educated the country about the opioid epidemic, which takes more lives in Ohio every day than car crashes do. I just love the fact he's going back. We've got good signs out of Indiana for Todd Young, and that would mean 2 new war veterans in the Senate. Senator-elect Duckworth and Senator-elect Todd Young would both be combat veterans, and I think that would be a good thing.
It's important you brought that up because we had lost a whole bunch of Vietnam vets. We had sort of a gap with very little military service in the Senate.
Don't forget Jason Kander in Missouri, definitely
that's right.
in it.
Tom Cotton was sort of the first one of these to
Dan Sullivan.
And Dan Sullivan, and now we're starting to see that new generation, Tom.
Well, and the fact is that this generation I've been very impressed with because they've come back and they say we want to be involved in public life. They're doing it not just by running for office, but they've got all kinds of foundations going on. They're running off to South America and to Africa, getting projects going there because they're mission-oriented. They were trained so well in the military, and they came back and they wanted to use the skills that they were trained with there. And my own hope is that we can expand that for young people, that the same kind of military training that they get, you can do in public service in other ways as well, and give them something to shoot for. The millennials are going to be the fastest growing, most educated, most entrepreneurial generation we've ever had in this country, and we don't want them on the outside looking in. We've got to get them into the system in some way.
All right, I want to bring in, actually, if I just interrupt, I want to bring in Kellyanne Conway, campaign manager for Donald Trump. She joins us from Trump Tower. Kellyanne, great to see you.
Hi, Lester.
Tell me what it's like now. You have done everything you can do. Now you, like the rest of the country, are waiting. What is it like? What are you seeing in the numbers so far?
Well, it's high energy here. I just was with Mr. Trump on my way down here. He's watching the returns, and we have a whole digital and data war room, not atypical, where we're getting many different inputs from all across the country and trying to piece together our 270. We feel really good about the fact that we've kept this race very competitive with a political veteran who has many advantages and a ton more money than we do. And I just think that the movement that Donald Trump has built has been able to grow the party in a very different way, be more pro-worker, a little less elitist, and frankly, a party that really represents change and not the status quo. We haven't always been able to claim that mantle.
I know you folks have said that Florida is a must-win. Let's put up, if we can put up the Florida numbers and show you where they are. I mean, right now we have it as too close to call, but Clinton with a 49-48 lead there. What are you seeing in those numbers? Does it worry you? Is there a path without Florida?
We have seen the same thing in our internal polling for weeks, if not months, in Florida, Lester, in that we never had Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton at 50% in any of our polls, and you see tonight that's actually happening. And ironically, it's not because the other party candidates were growing their electoral vote. They weren't. Their vote share was actually shrinking in the case of a Jill Steiner or Gary Johnson in most states. It's really just how divided the country and these states are. And Florida is always very tight. Even in the year 2000, it all came down to Florida. And when you look back, George W. Bush had been the nominee for a couple of years. They had cleared the field for him. He had the entire Republican infrastructure behind him, all the elected officials. His brother was the governor of the state, and he won by 527 votes and went all the way to the Supreme Court. So let's remind ourselves how tight of a contest Florida always is. We're hopeful, though, as the panhandle closes, they, of course, vote a whole extra hour because they're an hour behind time zone-wise, that we'll be able to catch up with her. Hillary Clinton banked a big early vote in Florida. But we saw that Mitt Romney was losing the early vote in Florida by about 167,000 votes or so. We cut that number almost in half to about 88,000.
Do you envy her ground
game?
So
we're hoping for a big day of. Pardon?
Do you envy her ground game?
I don't envy much about her, but I would say that they've got a very sophisticated ground game. She's basically been running for president for 8 years. I mean, since she lost the last time. And it's a very sophisticated operation. I mean, one can argue, Lester, she should have put us away a long time ago. If you've got that kind of ground game, you got all the money, all the king's horses, all the king's men, all the support, a current sitting president who's incredibly popular, and a first lady who's incredibly popular, a former president that's popular who just happens to be your husband, lots of celebrities. I mean, I think the great reluctance in this campaign has been of people to actually go there with Hillary Clinton to say, if I'm one of the 70% of Americans who wants change, who wants to take the country in a new and different direction, how can I vote for Hillary Clinton? There's been a great reluctance.
Kellyanne, I'm just going to stop you just for a second. We do have a call in the Senate race. Marco Rubio is the projected winner in Florida. What do you take from that?
I think that's terrific. He's been a great senator, and Florida's lucky to have him, and he would work very well with the President Donald Trump. So I'm glad he got back in the race, and I'm very happy that Floridians put him over the top.
Hey, Kellyanne, this is Chuck. It is interesting. I've been watching this all night to see what the performance was between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio in Florida. And he's basically overperforming you by about 3 points, a good 150,000 votes more that he's got than Donald Trump. Was Rubio a help to you? Is this a case where you're right now, if you win this, Rubio help pull you across the finish line in Florida, or how do you read it?
Well, it's a great ticket to have Trump and Rubio on the same ticket. I think it tells people that there are two people who want to improve upon Obamacare. There are two people who want to defeat radical Islamic terrorism, who want to create growth, economic growth, and more jobs. And they're very similar in many ways, certainly policy-wise. So we would hope, perhaps he can help us. Back to an earlier point, though, Chuck, too, there are some Senate races, and particularly governor races tonight, where we're running ahead of those candidates in their states. There hasn't been a lot of talk about that. There's talk about the reverse many times. But in the 4 states that have governor's races, in the last polls, we were ahead of those Republican gubernatorial candidates. So we like to think that we're helping some of those as well.
All right, Kellyanne, great to have you on. Thanks very much for joining us. Good to talk to you. Katie Tur is at Trump headquarters here in New York. Katie, what do you have?
Hey there, Lester. I just spoke with the GOP source in Ohio, a high-level source who tells me that they believe it is going to go down to the wire in Ohio. But they do have a bit of good news. They believe that Donald Trump didn't come in with such a deficit in the way that Romney did in early voting, and they believe that he could potentially make some good numbers up in 2 counties, in West Ohio and in Mahoning County. The Clinton team, on the other hand, is also feeling quite good about that state. It's a state, remember, that Donald Trump visited 26 times. The state that he was leading with many of the polls. It's a state that they started to feel very confident in. But now the Clinton campaign is saying that they are feeling pretty confident as well. They're optimistic. They're saying that no one wins in Ohio without putting in the work, without a ground game. Now, I spoke to my GOP source and asked them what sort of ground game did Donald Trump have in addition to the RNC. Remember, the Trump campaign had been heavily relying on the RNC's ground game effort, and that source said, I have no idea. Again, this is a race that is very, very, very close, and that GOP source believes that it could go so late into the night that potentially they won't be able to make a call tonight, maybe well into tomorrow as well. Lester?
All right, and right now we have it down as too close to call. Katie Tur, thanks very much. Hugh Hewitt, talk about, if you can, Republicans coming home. You were one of them.
Yeah.
That a few weeks ago you were calling for Donald Trump to leave the race. What transpired down the stretch?
Well, he didn't. I wanted to withdraw, and I think Mike Pence would have won easily tonight, but he didn't. So I voted for him, and he's run I'm actually kind of amazed to sit here and see Donald Trump racking up states on the Electoral College map that go down in history. I never thought he had a prayer of getting the nomination. I never thought we would be talking about this tonight. He changed the issues set in the race, but he is running behind the senators, and I want to go back to that. It's significant where there are. Portman is a lot ahead of him in Ohio, and Rubio is called, and he put Florida away, and Todd Young is probably doing better in Indiana. That's Mike Pence. If Dr. Joe Heck gets the same bump over Donald Trump in Nevada that Rubio got over Donald Trump, Joe Heck could be the next senator, Dr. General Joe Heck in Nevada.
I was just going to say, interestingly enough, Rob Portman thought at the beginning that Trump would help him down in that corner of Ohio, where it's Appalachia, where it comes together with West Virginia and Kentucky. In the end, then Portman was helping pull Trump.
By the way, consider this, guys. There may be a somebody who ran for the presidential nomination on the Republican side who we know will be giving a victory speech tonight.
Yeah.
And that's Marco Rubio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Maybe the only one who ran for president this cycle.
And he may have saved the Senate by getting back into the race as well. He may have saved the Senate for the Republicans.
Little Marco, as he was called by the man who was at the top of the ticket. And so it's sweet revenge for him.
By the way, President Obama went to Florida and shamed Marco Rubio by name, saying, how do you call someone in the primary a con artist and then say you're supporting him? And I think the direct quote from the president was, come on, man. But yet Marco Rubio prevails. And as Chuck was asking Kellyanne Conway, will he have some coattails for Donald Trump at the top of the ticket?
I think the important thing is, in terms of the presidential race, thus far, we've seen nothing surprising or nothing significant in our projections. I think that's going to change in an hour. I'd advise people to stick around because it's going to be a little bit different an hour from now. But right now, everything that we've seen is not surprising and eminently predictable.
All right, stay with us. A lot going on. We're going to check in on some key presidential battleground states, including some very interesting exit polls you'll want to see. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC. Outside view of the crowd gathering on Democracy Plaza on this big, big night. Hallie Jackson in the newsroom here. She and her team continuing to dig through the exit polling. Hallie, what's the latest on what you have? What insight can you share?
Lester, here's what we know, that no matter who ends up the president-elect of the United States tomorrow morning, about half of Americans are going to wake up with really deep concerns about that candidate. And that is actually what we're seeing driving voters to the polls. Take a look. People who voted for Hillary Clinton, 20% of them voted for her because they didn't like Donald Trump. That's twice what we saw back in 2012. Same goes, and even more extreme, for Donald Trump voters. Nearly 30% of them voted for Donald Trump because they didn't like Hillary Clinton. That's 3 times what we saw in 2012. So I think you could call this the nose holders vote, if you will. Somebody sort of casting their ballot, but holding their nose and doing it. I want to talk about a couple of really key swing states we've been talking about all night. The first one, Florida. And here's the breakdown so far. Remember, these are the early exit polls of Hispanic voters. You can see they are breaking more for Hillary Clinton. She is outperforming where Barack Obama was back in 2012. Donald Trump underperforming where Mitt Romney was. Last, I want to take a peek at Ohio and specifically union voters. What we are seeing from these early exits is that Donald Trump's message on trade, on the economy seems to be resonating. And we see that here. Back in 2012, more union households voted for the Democrat, but Donald Trump has reversed that trend in Ohio. He actually is appealing to more union voters, about half of them. He's outperforming Hillary Clinton by 6 percentage points there. Interesting stuff, given that Donald Trump's message throughout much of this campaign was aimed at working class voters. Lester.
All right, we're going to get right out now to the campaign headquarters, NBC's Kristen Welker at the Hillary Clinton headquarters of the Jacob Javits Center here in New York. Kristen.
Lester, good evening. Secretary Clinton fighting to make history tonight. She's watching returns with her family at a hotel here in New York. Her top campaign officials telling me they are feeling confident heading into tonight, feeling good about a robust ground game that they have built up. One official telling me they've knocked on 2 million doors today alone. They also feel good about the way that Secretary Clinton ended this race. One official saying she ended it on the exact note that she was hoping to, arguing that she will be a unifying force if she is elected, and talking about why she will be the most qualified president despite all of the divisive rhetoric and, of course, that email controversy which dogged her until the very end. Now, the states that they're watching closely, Michigan, that reliably blue state where Donald Trump has been making a serious play, North Carolina, and, of course, Florida. She's preparing 2 speeches tonight, but hoping she'll deliver a victory speech. Lester.
All right, Kristen. Peter Alexander is at the Trump headquarters at the Hilton down the block from us here in New York. What are you seeing there, Peter?
Lester, good evening to you. I just spoke to a top source close to Donald Trump who tells me they're feeling very good right now, touting what he describes as epic numbers, the turnout specifically in some white Republican counties in states like Michigan and New Hampshire right now. This source close to Donald Trump is now predicting victories in states like Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, New Hampshire, and the 2nd District of Maine. Gives you a sense of the real confidence they have right now. They also look at the lower than normal African-American turnout in places like Michigan and North Carolina that they think will have a benefit. But the bottom line, the source says right now is, I'm going to be realistic. You've got to be lucky, but this race is certainly going to be a lot closer than most Americans may have thought. Lester?
All right, Peter, thanks very much. Chuck ran over to the map here. What is it?
I did because, look, the turnout, the fact is everybody has higher turnout. And I'm going to give you an example of how Trump territory is turning out in much bigger numbers. I want to tell you the story here in Florida of Hernando County, okay? It's right up here. Mitt Romney won this county by 8 points. And you see here the total vote over there. I'm going to show you here. The total vote here, as you can see, about 87,000 total on this. Now, let me take you to 2016 and our map here, and I'm going to show you Hernando now. All the vote is not in. Trump is winning it by a whopping 29 points, and there is more vote. That's good news. That is a big deal. But let me take you to Miami-Dade.
There, yeah.
That's right. So he's increased the number overall, and he's getting 30% more of about 10,000 new voters. Now let me take you to Miami-Dade. 80% in. There's still 20% of the vote. Let's quickly add this up. You've got basically 1 million votes right now in Miami-Dade. They didn't top 900,000 during Barack Obama. She's winning by 30 points. Barack Obama won it by 24. The point is, good news for both of them. Their bases are up. She is winning bigger among more voters. He is winning big among a smaller group of new voters.
And our obsession with Florida on election night continues.
And there it is. It shows you Hernando, good news for Trump. Miami, great news for Trump.
All right, we need to get to a break. We're going to take a quick break, but we have a lot more of our coverage. The race to 270 electoral votes well underway. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC. Poll closings in another 7.5 minutes or so. As we look at the map there on Arkansas will be the next poll closing as we look at the map there. And I want to talk briefly, if I can, Savannah and Chuck, about every 4 years we're confronted with the way we elect presidents, this electoral college, the 270 number. Florida, of course, really put it in our face. And we always visit the idea, why do we do it that way?
Well, because the Constitution says so, but that doesn't make it any less odd. And I think for a lot of people watching this election and watching shows like ours, they're always hearing about national polls. Well, that's not how we elect a president in this country. As we learned distinctly in 2000, you could win the popular vote, but not win the Electoral College. So basically, our founders set it up that each state has a certain amount of electoral votes. It's based on population, and you've got to reach that magic number of 270.
Which is why you may not have seen any of these candidates come to your state.
It is, but can I tell you, there's a bug in this system. Number one, when you have an even number of electors, you can end in a tie. It is way too easy to end in a tie, and that is ridiculous to create a constitutional crisis under that
Lester,
scenario.
don't get Chuck started on the Electoral
But I'll
College.
tell you, I used to be a big defender of it. And then I will tell you this, go explain it to somebody overseas. And when you no longer the great American democracy and you can't tell them it's one person, one vote, it's like, well, and you're just like, by the time you're explaining, going, what have I done? It is very difficult when it's difficult to explain your own voting system to somebody overseas. Maybe you need a new one.
But it's the playing field we have, right, James?
Look, it may not be the system we want, but it's the system we got, and that's what we're going to have tonight, and we're going to go through with it.
That's how we roll, as they say. Stay with us. Polls are about to close in the state of Arkansas, where Bill Clinton served as governor before winning the White House himself. We'll have that and more on our Decision Night in America coverage right here on NBC.
Decision Night in America continues.
I'm Chanel Jones, live in the NBC News Washington Bureau. In the last half hour, another 17 polls have closed, including key states like Florida, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. Look at this. Many of those races too close to call at this hour. But NBC News has projected winners in these states. Donald Trump, the winner in Alabama, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Hillary Clinton has now picked up Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Joining us from Columbus, Ohio, a must-win state for both candidates, is our own Ann Thompson. Ann, good evening to you. What can you tell us?
Hi, Chanel. Well, the good news out of Ohio is that there have been very few voting problems here today. You know, earlier, before this election, there was a lot of concern about whether there would be voter intimidation. In fact, the Democratic Party in this state went as far as to the Supreme Court trying to get a group called Steal the Vote, Stop the Steal from intimidating voters at Ohio polling places. The Supreme Court said, no, you don't have to do that. The voter intimidation laws are strong enough. And as a result, very few problems, only one lawsuit filed here in Ohio over any kind of voting irregularity, and that was dismissed. The polls closed about an hour ago. We are starting to see numbers come in, but as you said, this is a very close race at this point, and key certainly for Donald Trump. Ohio is a must-win state for him if he is to advance to the White House. Chanel?
And obviously no Republican has reached the White House without winning Ohio. What's the mood there? There is so much attention being paid to Ohio. Is there any buzz that you can kind of give us, a mood, if you will?
I think the mood here is like much of the country, Chanel, is that people are just glad this day has come and they're very anxious to see the result. But what you'll see in Ohio is as we watch these results, it is sort of a get out the vote effort that was very sophisticated on the part of the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton versus more enthusiasm that Donald Trump was counting on. As one GOP source told me, he really has kind of a cobbled together get out the vote effort here. And there was a split with the state party, so the state party focused on the senatorial race and down ballot and didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the top of the ticket. Chanel?
And finally, I don't know if you're able to speak to this, in some of the states around the country, we were seeing these long lines, but voters were enthusiastic about casting their vote. What did you see there?
We saw long lines too. We were out in Montgomery County, which is the county that Dayton sits in, and it is a swing county. And people were waiting 20 to 30 minutes to cast their ballot, but they did so in a very orderly manner and in an almost reverential manner. This clearly, Ohioans have taken their right to vote very, very seriously. Chanel?
That's good to hear. NBC's Ann Thompson, thanks for talking with us this evening. Joining me once again is Jennifer Lawless from American University. Let's dig into Ohio really quickly. Ohio has a high proportion of white voters without a college degree. Job losses are a concern. Obviously, that helps Donald Trump.
That does. That's Donald Trump's key demographic group. And so the extent to which those people turn out to vote this time around are a good indicator of how well he'll do in Ohio.
Also this evening, we're certainly watching some of the Senate races that are important. I want to mention Florida. Marco Rubio, it seems, keeps his seat.
He did keep his seat, and the irony here, of course, is that when Donald Trump won the Florida primary, that was when Marco Rubio got out of the race. And tonight, it's clear that Florida voters want Marco Rubio, and they're not yet decided on Donald Trump.
And another one that a lot of people are watching around the country, the state of Illinois. It looks like the land of Lincoln delivers a win for Democratic Representative Tammy Duckworth.
Right, so this is a Democratic pickup. It's also a pickup in terms of the number of women serving in the Senate, and it marks a pretty substantial incumbent defeat.
I was just about to say, I realize that people all around the country are watching, so sometimes they don't know the ins and outs of some of the particular races. But what should the takeaway be so far with these two Senate races?
So far, neither is a surprise.
Okay.
So I think we're sort of exactly where we would expect to be at this point in the evening.
And if we push back just for a second and we look at the big picture, your impression so far of this race, what would you say?
Again, no surprises yet. Once we start hearing about outcomes in North Carolina, Virginia, Florida, Ohio, New Hampshire, I think we'll have a little bit more of an idea of where the night's going.
You use the word yet. Does that mean you think we'll see some surprises?
We'll see.
We'll see.
I hope so.
You can never predict. That is one thing. Jennifer Lawless, thank you so much. Coming up in the next half hour, polls close in the Razorback State, Arkansas. That would bring us to the halfway point, with polls still open in 25 states. Stay with NBC News for all of your latest election results. And now back to Lester Holt in New York for continuing coverage of Decision Night in America.
We're back now with more of our coverage. Polls have closed in another state, and we have another call to make, and this is control of the House of Representatives. NBC News projects that Republicans will retain control of the House of Representatives. Now let's quickly take you outside, where we've got a call from the state of Arkansas. And as we move up the building, NBC News projects that Donald Trump will win in the state of Arkansas. Of course, the state that Hillary Clinton was for many, many years the first lady. We're back with our panel right now, and Chuck, you're going over your
I am.
here.
Nicole and I.
He's
look,
geeking
can
out
I interrupt
here.
just a moment?
Tell he was Florida PTSD.
Well, first of all, that's right. Don't forget, she worked in Florida before she worked for President Bush. That's right. You know, back in the day when we were both young bucks, we were just both sitting there. What's out in Florida? 91% in. I think Trump's leading by about 60,000 votes, and we're both noting, like, why is the Clinton campaign feeling good and the Trump campaigning not so good? It's because of what's remaining, what's out. And we were just looking. I mean, Gainesville still hasn't come in. That's a college town. You still got a lot, almost half of the Broward vote hasn't come in.
Half of Palm Beach.
Half of Palm Beach, and still about 15% of Miami-Dade. And as we showed you, she's winning Miami-Dade by numbers that are landslide-like for Miami-Dade.
And why do we care so much about Florida? Because for Trump, it's as close to a must-win as there is. It's not that he can't put together 270 votes without Florida, but it becomes exceedingly difficult.
For me, it's deja vu.
I said you don't.
PTSD, look at Tom. He's going, what are you talking about?
You've seen this movie.
Florida. I mean, at one point I had Bill Daley in one ear and I had Karl Rove in the other ear on the phone saying, what's going on? I said, if you don't know, how do I know what's going on?
Back in 2000, of course.
Florida. I mean, the late Tim Russert, we miss on nights like this. But it was an
we could be.
amazing
But the bigger story is both bases came out. You know, the fact is everything came out. It just may be she has a bigger base.
And just a record keep now. Ohio is too close to call. Florida too close to call. Pennsylvania too early to call. So those are big ones hanging out there right now. We want to go to Andrea Mitchell. She's at Hillary Clinton headquarters here in New York. Are they feeding into any of this? Are they watching these numbers the way we are?
Oh, you can imagine how much they are watching it, their boiler room, their war room, looking at it. And over at the Peninsula Hotel, only a few blocks from here, both Clintons have now weighed in on the speech that they hope they'll be delivering. Two versions, as we said. One is a victory speech. And so the speechwriters were in the hotel with both Bill and Hillary Clinton. Imagine having both of those principals editing your speech, and now the speechwriters are going back to work, making some changes. So we've all been edited by our editors and producers, but that's a pretty high-powered team of Bill and Hillary Clinton editing. The other thing to report is that my Democratic sources, this is not campaign sources, these are Democratic Party sources in Michigan telling me they're getting a little nervous in Michigan because the Democratic areas of Detroit and Flint are not showing the kind of vote that they had wanted to see. It's obviously early, but it's raining. They're a little worried about this. Michigan could be very tight. As you know, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were there only yesterday, and it would be far more important for Donald Trump's path. He really wants to flip a blue state, not critical for Clinton, but they would still like to win Michigan. They lost it, as you know, in a surprising upset by Bernie Sanders. The trade issue is a big factor there against Clinton and for Trump. Lester?
All right, Andrea, thanks very much. Joining us now from Clinton headquarters is former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm. Governor, good to have you on. Thanks so much.
So great to be on. Thanks so much.
I watched you on MSNBC earlier today, and you couldn't wipe the smile off your face.
I know. It's democracy.
Give me the
really.
But that was earlier. Now that you're starting to see some raw vote totals come in and watching what we're watching in Florida, how is your level and the campaign's level of confidence right now?
I think we feel really good because, as Chuck was saying, there are still a huge sectors of the electorate that have not come in, and a lot of that are our people, whether it's Broward County or, in Michigan. As you know, in many of these states that we count on, a lot of the urban areas come in later than the rural areas, and so we are feeling really good still.
All right. Now, we've talked about Florida being a must-win. That's according to the Trump folks. But without it, he made you defend Pennsylvania. Look where the Clinton campaign ended yesterday. How do you feel about Pennsylvania?
Good about Pennsylvania. In fact, we think between Pennsylvania and Virginia and North Carolina, I think, again, it's still early. You got to see the rest come in, but we're feeling really good about the ground game that we have mustered, what we're hearing on the ground anecdotally and what we're seeing in the numbers. We know what's out there. So everybody on my side, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And by the way, can we not all just celebrate that it's record turnout in democracy? People really love this country and care about it.
But come on, something's got to be making you nervous right now. What is it?
Well, Michigan always makes me nervous because that's my state. And I am concerned about the numbers in Detroit and Flint, but I do know that a lot of that is made up for by the very large, for example, Arab American community that's in Michigan, in Dearborn. We know that President Clinton actually visited, and there's huge turnout in that community. So if there is a diminution in votes in Detroit, we've made up for it, I think, with the votes in the Arab American community, the Latino community, and frankly, we had banked 50,000 of the absentee votes. So we still, it's still close. It's closer than anybody wants it to be, but I feel very good about Michigan anyway. Still makes me nervous, though.
All right, Governor, always good to talk to you.
Until it's in.
Thank you so much for joining us. Savannah, you've got a Senate call here.
We do. State of Indiana, deep red, and it's a Republican hold for the Senate. We have Congressman Young, Todd Young, going to the Senate. Evan Bayh, whose name you probably recognize, a former senator from Indiana, was vying to get his seat back. What an interesting story, because this is a case where it's really not expected to be a battleground. For a moment, it seemed it might be because the strength of Evan Bayh's connection to the state of Indiana. A lot of Democrats were excited. Hey, maybe we can make
somehow
this
he got painted as an outsider.
Well, no, he too much of an insider. Way too much of an insider. Somebody who had lost his Indiana roots. Somebody who barely had an address anymore in Indiana.
He could remember the correct. I think he got a court and avenue confused of his Indiana address.
Yeah, so he had these deep Indiana roots, and yet it wasn't enough. And so we see that Indiana holds. That's a red state, stays that way. Doesn't alter our ultimate Senate math. We still just have one Democratic pickup on the record, I believe, so far. But but one of the races we were closely watching because it had the potential to be competitive.
All right. The interesting thing about Young Bai is that he got whipsawed by his prior job. He was working for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Then they came out against him. He'd been away for a while, and he kind of assumed that he was going to go back.
He's a Democrat that from another era.
Yeah.
Okay, a centrist Democrat that just didn't fit this Democratic Party. Right. He thought, oh, look, Donald Trump's unpopular. Maybe I can sneak back into the Senate.
Yeah.
Never forget when he left the Senate, he penned this op-ed. Remember, you and I were covering the White House then, and he said, I don't love Congress. I think there are better ways to serve. And yet here we are, 2016, he was trying to get back in, but no dice.
No dice.
And you mentioned Karl Rove. I mean, this is sort of Don Rumsfeld's known unknowns. It's a known unknown how the top of the ticket's going to turn out. But Republicans, I'm hearing from all over the country, feeling very cheered by this Senate seat and very cheered by what they're seeing with Marco Rubio and other down-ballot races.
Hallie Jackson has another look at exit polling, specifically what women voters are saying. Hallie, that's something we continue to focus on in this race.
And Lester, we started talking about it, if you can believe it, a year and 3 months ago at that very first primary debate for Republicans when the first question to Donald Trump was about his comments about women. Here we are on election night, and take a look at what our early exit polls are telling us, that 51% of voters across the country are bothered a lot by Donald Trump's treatment of women. And so watch what happens to this purple section of the pie here when we dive into how this breaks out. Of those voters who say they were bothered a lot, look at how it breaks down. 8 in 10 say they voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. Not particularly surprising when you look at the fact that they say they're bothered by women, but it is certainly notable in that Hillary Clinton made her closing argument, at least part of it, on Trump's treatment of women. And for these voters, Lester, that is something that has resonated.
And I want to continue on what you're talking about there. Kate Snow joins us now from King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, where she's been talking with women voters. Kate?
Hi, Lester. Here's the thing. We're in what's called the collar counties outside of Philadelphia, the suburban counties outside of Philly. And these counties, since 1976, have really predicted the way the state of Pennsylvania will go. So that's why we're here. We got a lot of Trump supporters here and behind me, but I wanted to talk to a few women over here who are actually all Hillary Clinton supporters, if I can just barge in for a second. So, Jennifer, you were telling me that you voted Republican up until recently, but today you voted for Hillary Clinton.
Oh, definitely.
And why?
Because she's knowledgeable. She's the most qualified candidate running for office, and I agree with a lot of the things that she stands for.
We were just talking about the exit polling, and a lot of it is showing that many women were turned off by Donald Trump. Is that part of what motivated your vote?
Definitely. I think that the derogatory things that he said to the media have been repulsive. I'm also, reproductive rights are important to me, so.
Sheila and Vicky are both wearing lace and white on purpose. What's that about, Sheila?
It's a call out to the suffragettes who called for the original women's votes, and it's such a historic day having a female candidate for a major party, so we wanted to kind of recognize that.
And if she wins tonight, you told me you're in your 30s, right? You guys are millennials. What does that mean for you if Hillary Clinton pulls this off?
It's just such an important event that I will be so impressed if she wins and so happy because of what I value. And she really, epitomizes that and can speak well in that. And it's just an incredible candidate.
Thank you guys so much for sharing a little bit. Appreciate it. Lester, the thing is, as I said, these counties really can be important in the way that Pennsylvania goes. We're checking in with all of the offices here. In terms of these 4 counties, turnout does seem to be pretty high, according to both the Democrats that I've talked to and the Republicans that I've talked to. They're talking about long lines. I just talked to the Delaware County chair of the Democratic Party, who thinks that they're going to be counting votes here for a long time after the official poll closing. So polls closed here at 8 o'clock, but they think there are people still in line, Lester, and they may be at it until late tonight.
Yeah, we suspect so. Kate Snow, thanks. And again, Pennsylvania, we have it in our column as too early to call. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to check in with more of our correspondents fanned out across America in key battleground states, what they're seeing and what they're hearing on the ground when our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC. As we come back to our election center from a break, you're watching Senator Marco Rubio, who is projected to defeat Republican Patrick Murphy, making comments to the crowd there with his family, and we'll continue to monitor that. Meantime, we continue to watch what's happening around battleground states across the country, and Chuck Todd has moved over to the map here. He's trying to figure out where things stand right now as we wait some of these big states.
A little bit, but you know, we need to remind people here, Virginia, we moved to too close to call. Now, the numbers have been creeping up. There's still a lot of Northern Virginia vote still to go. As you know, Loudoun, as Loudoun goes, so goes things. So that's the good news for Clinton. But as we've told you, and I want to make sure I see if I get Campbell County here just right. Whoop. Get this just right. Here we go. This was a question about whether he would do well with some evangelicals. And you look here, I mean, the numbers are big for Trump and Trump territory, too. This goes to, and Nicole, you were sharing with me Steve Schale, who ran Florida for Obama, both in 08 and 12. He said everybody's vote totals have been shattered in the state of Florida. We're going to have record turnout in the state of Florida in the red counties and in the blue counties. Now, we'll see how this balances out, but it explains why we're seeing some of these battleground states. Virginia was something that a lot of people thought, and she's doing well in the Northern Virginia, but he's doing well in Trump country.
We're all waiting with bated breath for when the polls close in Michigan. As you know, the Clinton folks were rushed in to defend what they thought was a sizable lead in Michigan. Kevin Tibbles is at a Trump watch party in Grand Rapids, Michigan. How are they feeling about this night?
Well, people here tonight have been listening to you folks, Lester, talking about how Michigan all of a sudden seems to have come into play here. People here say that in western Michigan, which is where Grand Rapids is, you're absolutely right that the Hillary Clinton campaign had to come in here yesterday. But of course, being a GOP rally here this evening, they were all out after midnight last night because Donald Trump made one of his final stops here. Grand Rapids all of a sudden is on the map with regards to this election campaign, Lester. They were also listened to the fact that in the Democratic areas in and around Detroit, people are now saying that the turnout was not very good. Well, here in western Michigan, which there are very strong Republican pockets, like the one I'm speaking to you from, they're saying that the lines were down the street when they got there this morning. They are very sort of encouraged by what they say they saw on the streets here in Michigan today, Lester.
All right, let's stay in the the Midwest. Kevin, thanks very much. Kelly O'Donnell is at House Speaker Paul Ryan's headquarters in Janesville, Wisconsin, in the Midwest. Hey, Kelly.
Good evening, Lester. This is unusual. House Speaker Paul Ryan is actually in the room here. He is over my left shoulder, milling about with some of the guests who have come to his headquarters tonight. For Paul Ryan, this is really kind of a three-level night. His own House race, which he expects to win easily, kind of a position for the future of the party. Will he be and continue to be the highest-ranking Republican in elective office? And of course, if Donald Trump were to win, that would put him in the second spot. And what happens next for the congressional majority? It's expected the House will hold its majority. What will happen on the Senate side? And how will Congress have a partnership with the new president, whomever that is? But it is a bit unusual, and I guess it's a sense of how Paul Ryan expects his own personal night as a candidate to go, that he is here in the room greeting supporters, hugs directly behind me, talking with folks who have been a part of his life here in Janesville. I'm told he will speak fairly early this evening and will reflect on his own race and not wait for the whole night to resolve itself. He'll have plenty to say about all of that in the next few days. Lester?
About Paul Ryan and what his future is like, no matter how this thing shakes out tonight.
Listen, nobody grappled more publicly or painfully with their endorsement of Donald Trump than Speaker Ryan. And people who were longtime Paul Ryan staffers and advisors and who sort of had come into and out of the presidential race in 12, onto the Romney ticket and remained advisors, had hoped that he would take a principled stand against a nominee that a lot of establishment Republicans thought just
stood for everything that Paul Ryan had worked for. Paul Ryan is one of the architects of modern conservative policymaking. He's an expert on the intricacies of budget making. He really has conservative solutions for education and poverty. And whatever you think of those ideas, he is one of the chief architects in sort of the conservative thinkers group. So when he endorsed Donald Trump, it was a real setback to the never Trump wing of the GOP, which at that point I think had unrealistic aspirations for what a sitting Speaker of the House could do. The truth is, he has a job of being chief wrangler of cats, and that GOP caucus was overwhelmingly pro-Trump. So that's the reality that he's dealing with, whether Trump wins or loses. And there are a lot of rumors. They're just rumors. It's sort of an undercurrent, an additional anxiety for all of us hand-wringing establishment Republicans that he may be in a little bit of jeopardy in terms of his post.
I think especially the other thing about Speaker Ryan is that he has not given up his own presidential aspirations, and that had to be a conflict in his mind. Play the part of the leader of the House Republicans, try to keep that intact, but at the same time keep his eye on the far horizon, because if Trump does go down, then he's obviously going to be a front runner. If Trump wins tonight, which we still believe that there's a possibility that he could do that.
Absolutely.
Then Paul Ryan has got a handful of trouble, not just with the people who are in the House with him, but with the new president of the United States as well.
Don't you think he has trouble no matter who wins tonight?
Right.
I mean, because
it's a no-win proposition for him.
It really
at this
is,
point.
because if Trump loses, there are going to be a lot of people who look hard at Paul Ryan and other establishment Republicans saying, hey, where were you? If you had been more enthusiastic for our nominee, maybe we'd be having a different result tonight. So Paul Ryan maybe has the worst job in Washington.
And this is the worst nightmare for him, this tightness.
All right. Yeah. We're going to take a break. We got a lot coming up. In a moment, we'll take a lay of the land. Where does the map stand? Which states are still in play? Which poll closings are upcoming? Stay with us. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC.
Hey, Lester, that's right. We are out here on Democracy Plaza, where the situation here is very electric. I want to take you through the crowd here and show you some of the voters. We've got a lot of Clinton voters over here. We've got some Trump supporters behind us. And what we find is about 50% of this country, 60% of this country believe that this country will be divided when we wake up tomorrow. And so this is an area, oh no. We've got a voter here from Arkansas as well, Lester. But what we want to tell you is, let's hear it. Okay. So here at Democracy Plaza, a lot of action, a lot of voters coming from all over the country here, and we'll send it back to you in studio.
All right, Joe Ling, thanks very much. And if you're in the neighborhood, come on down to Democracy Plaza. Big TVs there, and just be careful when you walk. We mentioned this coming hour, Arizona, New Mexico, but you're still watching Florida.
Look, I'm going to just show you really quick. Florida, less than 1%, 100,000 votes. Georgia, we still don't have a lot of vote in, but let me show you North Carolina. As you can see here, Clinton narrowly ahead, still a lot in, and of course Virginia too close to call. So, wow. The backbone states of the battleground are all too close.
Hope you didn't make a dinner reservation. We're going to be here a while.
We are going to be here.
All right, stay with us. Yeah, breakfast. Polls about to close in 14 states minutes from now. A lot of news to get to. You don't want to miss a moment. Get comfy. Our Decision Night in America coverage continues here on NBC.
President, NBC News now projecting the Republicans will remain in control of the House of Representatives. A big relief, of course, for Speaker Paul Ryan. Joining us now from Hillary Clinton's headquarters in New York City is Kristen Welker. Good evening to you. Set the stage for us. What's going on right now?
Chanel, good evening. Secretary Clinton is huddled with her family, watching returns, writing her speech for tonight, what she hopes will be a victory speech. I am told by her top campaign officials that she is feeling confident. She feels good about this race that she ran. She feels very good about the robust ground game that they have. One top official telling me that they knocked on more than 2 million doors alone today. They feel good about the fact that Secretary Clinton ended this race in the way that she wanted to. Despite all of the controversies, the heated rhetoric, the email controversy that dogged her until the very end, Secretary Clinton in the remaining hours of this race talked about and argued for the fact that she would be a unifying force if she were elected president. They also think she made a very strong case for why she is the most qualified person to be president. Top campaign officials pointing to that big rally in Philadelphia last night, which drew more than 30,000 people, her largest rally of this entire campaign. And it was unprecedented because it brought together the Clintons and the Obamas. We heard from both the president and the first lady. In terms of the states that they're watching closely tonight, Chanel, Michigan, that's a reliably blue state where Donald Trump has been making a very aggressive play. Also North Carolina, that's a state where African Americans didn't turn out as heavily as they had hoped in early voting. And they're also hoping to hold court in a reliably blue state like Pennsylvania. And then, of course, Florida, just as in every election cycle. If she wins Florida, it would be almost impossible for Donald Trump to win the White House. So those are the states that they are watching. Secretary Clinton, again, huddled with family members, hammering out the final details of her speech. We are here in the Javits Center, Chanel, which has a glass ceiling. Secretary Clinton hoping to be able to say at the end of the night that she, in fact, did shatter the glass ceiling, becoming the first female president. Chanel.
I'm sure she's hoping she can certainly do that. I want to ask you about Michigan really quickly. We're hearing so much this evening about the fact that it's so close right now. Is the campaign as confident behind the scenes as they are on camera? It seems like, you know, when I hear them interviewing on camera, they're still very optimistic.
Well, look, there's no doubt they have been concerned about Michigan for days, Chanel. Secretary Clinton added extra events in the final days of this race, really hoping to hold court there. They do have a robust ground game there. 35 offices, and they have been there for quite some time. So they're hoping that their ground game will put them over the edge. Just moments ago, I spoke with one of Secretary Clinton's top campaign officials who said, look, Michigan might be close, but we still think we're going to pull out a victory there. Chanel.
All right, Kristen Welker, I watched you when I woke up this morning, and I have a feeling we'll be talking to you again. So very long day. I'll let you get a break. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Joining us now to talk about this is Jennifer Lawless. She's a professor at American University. And I should mention, you've written 4 books, is that correct?
About women in politics.
About women in politics. So then tell me this, what's your take about what Kristen Welker has been talking about, and really Hillary Clinton so far, her campaign?
Well, this is a campaign that ultimately is going to come down to female voters, but all presidential campaigns do. There's been a gender gap in every race since 1980, where women are more likely than men to support the Democratic candidate. This time around, Donald Trump gave women extra ammunition to do so. The question is whether Hillary Clinton was able to mobilize them, and we'll see that through the night.
So I will say, at the very beginning of this, 18 months ago, people were saying Hillary Clinton, slam dunk for women voters. Would you say that now?
Well, what's important to keep in mind here is that Hillary Clinton is a slam dunk for female voters because women are more likely to support the Democrat. And that's been the case going back till 1980. It's not a slam dunk simply because she's a female candidate.
So far, any surprises?
Still nothing.
All right. Jennifer, thank you for talking with us this evening. Stick around. Coming up in the next hour, 14 more states close their polling places, including Michigan, Wisconsin, and Colorado, all seen as toss-ups going into today's election. So we will see you again in 30 minutes. Now back to Lester Holt in New York for NBC News continuing coverage of Decision Night in America.